Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been looking forward to this trip for weeks. St. Patrick's Day weekend in Ocean City, Maryland with my college friends was exactly the kind of break I needed after midterms. The town was empty since it was off season, but that was part of the appeal. We could actually enjoy the beach without fighting crowds. My silver Civic was packed with friends, music blasting when we made our way through the inlet. The weather was decent for mid-March, chilly but not freezing, and everyone was in high spirits. My friend in the passenger seat grew up here and knew these roads like the back of her hand. We'd been driving around checking out the area when the main road suddenly narrowed down to a single lane. I noticed the speed limit sign changed to 30 miles per hour. My friend turned down the music a bit and warned me about the cops. She told me that even though it was off-season, police were everywhere right now, and they were super strict about speeding on this stretch. She said I really wanted to stick to exactly 30 miles per hour. I told her I understood and would stay at 30. I kept my eyes on my speedometer, making sure I wasn't going even 1 mile over. That's when I first noticed the red pickup truck pull up behind me, way too close behind me. At first I thought maybe he'd just merge into the other lane once we hit the wider part of the road, but we were still in the single lane section. I maintained my speed, watching the road carefully. The truck didn't back off. If anything, it seemed to get closer. Then the honking started. Short, aggressive blasts of the horn. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw the driver gesturing wildly. Then came the high beams flashing on and off repeatedly. One of my friends in the back asked if this guy was serious since I was literally going the speed limit. Another friend mentioned that the driver looked like he was screaming at me and wondered what his problem was. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Looking in my mirror again, I could swear there were only inches between my bumper and his front grille. One tap of my brakes and he'd plow right into me. I said I hoped he wasn't on something and asked if anyone else realized there might be a reason I wasn't speeding. One friend in the back told me that if he rammed me, she would help me hide the body. My passenger friend told me to ignore him and agreed with what the other friend said. Part of me wanted to pull into a side street and let this maniac pass. His truck could demolish my little car if he decided to get physical, but I was angry now. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was following the law and my friend had just warned me about the cops in this exact area. I kept driving, exactly 30 miles per hour, eyes forward. The truck stayed glued to my bumper, the driver's anger radiating through the metal. My hands were sweating despite the cool air coming through the vents. The honking continued. More high beam flashing. I could hear my friends in the back making comments about the driver's mental state, but I tuned them out. All my focus was on the road ahead and not letting this guy rattle me into doing something stupid. After what felt like forever, the road opened up to 3 lanes. We approached the red light and I stopped in the right lane. The pickup pulled up beside me in the left lane. I didn't look over. The light seemed to take an eternity to change. Green light. I started moving at a normal pace, sticking to my lane. The pickup shot forward like he'd been launched from a catapult, swerving around me and blasting past. When he flew by, the driver stuck his entire arm out the window, middle finger extended in my direction. I just kept cruising at the posted speed limit. One friend in the back called him a tool. I was about to agree when I saw something beautiful. Up ahead, maybe 3 blocks away, a police officer was flagging down the red pickup truck. Blue lights started flashing. I asked if everyone else was seeing this too. My passenger friend repeated that there was no way this was happening. Everyone in the car started erupting in cheers. Since there was barely any traffic, I slowed down just a little bit, timing it so we'd pass right when the driver was getting out of his truck. My friends were already rolling down the windows. When we approached, the officer was standing there talking to the driver who looked livid. The cop had this huge grin on his face like he couldn't believe what he'd just witnessed. My friends hung out the windows, cheering and waving. I kept both hands on the wheel and my eyes mostly forward, not wanting to give the cop any reason to pull us over too. but I could see everything in my peripheral vision. One friend yelled out that we tried to warn him. Another friend shouted not to drive angry. Another friend blew kisses at the officer, who was now laughing openly. The driver's face had gone completely red. My passenger friend stuck her head out and announced that this was why you don't tailgate the locals. We cruised past, still going exactly the speed limit, leaving the red pickup and its very unhappy driver behind. The weekend was fantastic after that. We hit the boardwalk, found some good food, and generally had an amazing time. But the story wasn't quite over. Sunday afternoon, we were heading back to the car after lunch when I spotted something familiar. A red pickup truck driving very carefully down the main strip. I told everyone to look at what I was seeing. We all watched when the same truck from 2 days ago drove past us, going so slowly that other cars were passing him. The driver stared straight ahead, both hands on the wheel, looking like he'd learned his lesson the hard way. My friends burst out laughing all over again. One friend in the back wondered if he would remember this next time. I said I really hoped so. I'd lost my government job about a year before everything shut down, and honestly, I wasn't too worried at first. Being an audiologist meant work was out there, but I knew the real money was in running my own practice. After liquidating some investments that had performed well and securing financing, I started hunting for the perfect property. My vision was clear: open my practice and rent out additional space to create steady income on the side. That's when I found this incredible building downtown was a massive parking lot. The place used to be a commercial garage, but someone had transformed it beautifully. Where those huge bay doors once stood, there were now these gorgeous window-filled walls that still opened like garage doors, creating covered outdoor spaces in front of each unit. The whole aesthetic was clean, modern, almost Scandinavian in a way. I fell in love with it immediately. The day I showed up for my first tour, I pulled into the lot like the realtor instructed. The second my feet hit the pavement, this woman came charging out of the building toward me. She had piercings all over her face and was practically screaming that I needed to move my car immediately, or it would be towed. I tried explaining that I had a meeting there, but she would have none of it. She kept yelling that I needed to move it right then, or she was calling the police. I was about to relocate when the realtor and owner spotted us from across the lot and started walking over. She immediately retreated before they could get close enough to sort things out. I confirmed I was allowed to park there, and they assured me it was fine. I asked who that woman was, and they told me she owned one of the shops in the building. The owner told me to just ignore her, saying she thought she ran the place. He and the realtor shared a laugh about it, which should have been my first warning sign. The property tour went great and I was sold on the place. Since closing would take time, I agreed to lease one of the units and start setting up my practice while the paperwork went through. For about 2 months, I was technically just another tenant, keeping my purchase plans quiet since my interactions with neighbors were mostly brief and professional. Well, mostly. The screaming woman from the parking lot owned a costume shop. She made custom steampunk outfits and period costumes, which were genuinely impressive. I rarely saw customers in her store though, so I figured most of her business happened online. Less than a week after I moved in, she barged into my unit uninvited. She started going on about how I needed to be aware that the parking lot was not for customers. She said it was for us only, and I was only allowed one spot. I thanked her but told her I already had parking all worked out with the owner. I showed her the door before she could continue. According to her bizarre logic, the 60-space parking lot was meant for only 5 spots total, 1 per unit, with absolutely no customer or visitor parking allowed. Either something shady was happening or she was completely making things up. I decided to ignore her. Time passed and I closed on the building. The previous owner sent out a gracious email to all tenants, thanking them for their business over the years and announcing that the property now belonged to my company. Pretty straightforward stuff. My first act owner was reorganizing the parking situation. Each unit got 1 premium spot right next to the building, plus I designated 2 15-minute loading zones and 5 handicapped spaces. The rest remained general parking. Eventually, I planned to install an automated kiosk where Business patrons could park free, while others would pay, but that was down the road. For now, I'd just monitor the security cameras if illegal parking became an issue. The costume shop owner was livid. She ranted about insufficient handicap spots, even though there had been zero before. She complained the loading zone time limit was too short, but mostly she was furious that nobody had consulted her about any of it. A few days later, I parked on the paved area next to my unit to unload some equipment. This spot was on the private sidewalk that branched off from the public walkway, accessible only through my parking lot. Since I owned the space and everything around it, I didn't rush to move my car after unloading. When I walked outside later, my car was gone. My first thought was theft. Then I saw her standing in her doorway with this huge smirk plastered across her face. I asked her if she knew anything about my missing car. She responded by asking if that was mine, then cheerfully admitted she'd seen a car parked illegally, so she had it towed. I told her to laugh it up because any expense was getting added to her rent. I drove to the tow company the previous owner had used and tore into them for towing anything from my property without my authorization. They claimed they had a contract with the property, which was false. Their contract had been with the previous owner's company and was now void. Arguing seemed pointless, so I just paid the fee and took my car. I left that place burning with rage and laser-focused on payback. I started carefully reviewing my security footage and noticed something interesting. All these random vehicles parking in my lot had one thing in common: her. I suspected she was selling parking spaces, so I waited by one of the cars until the driver returned. He was walking from a completely different area, nowhere near my building. I told him when he approached that he wasn't authorized to park there. He looked confused and told me to mind my own business, saying he paid for parking. I introduced myself, owner of the lot, and asked who he was paying and how much. His answer confirmed everything. He was paying her $125 per month. Suddenly, her business model made perfect sense. I considered confronting her directly or just evicting her immediately. Instead, I hired a security company. They set up a temporary booth at the parking lot entrance, and a guard made sure everyone there was actually patronizing one of the businesses. Anyone who parked and wandered elsewhere got warned about being towed. Anyone claiming to have paid for parking got turned away. Over the next week, roughly 24 extremely angry people stormed into her shop. They'd paid good money for those spots, and now she was pulling the rug out from under them. People were furious. She kept a low profile after that. Then everything changed when the virus hit, and we were all genuinely scared about staying in business. When regulations allowed, I told tenants they could open those big garage-style doors and use the covered outdoor space for their businesses. This fell outside their lease terms, since outdoor seating wasn't previously permitted, but it was necessary to keep them operating. Everyone was thrilled about this arrangement. Everyone except her. Her unit sat between a coffee shop on one side and a specialty bakery on the other. Now customers had to walk around outdoor seating areas to reach her store. My unit had the same setup, and it really wasn't a big deal. She was absolutely fuming. She started calling the police multiple times daily, every single day, claiming virus-related violations by me and the other tenants. This happened after I'd said nothing about her working in her store, even when non-essential businesses were supposed to be closed. The police stopped responding after her third or fourth call. That was it. I'd had enough. Her lease expired that May, so I simply chose not to renew it. She threatened up and down that she was going to sue me and take ownership of the entire building when she was done. I responded by suing her for the $125 per month she'd collected from all those people for parking. She just didn't show up to court, resulting in a summary judgment in my favor. I don't expect to actually collect that money, but she abandoned at least a few $1,000s worth of inventory and equipment when she finally left, which will definitely help offset things. I've been meaning to spend more quality time with my family for weeks. Between work schedules and the usual chaos of raising two daughters, it felt like we were always rushing from one thing to the next. When my wife suggested a picnic that Saturday morning, I knew it was exactly what we needed. She found me in the garage where I was pretending to fix my bike but mostly just procrastinating. She asked if I wanted to do something different today. I asked her what she had in mind. She suggested a picnic and said the girls would love it. I thought about it for a second. We usually stuck to the same routine on weekends. Movies, shopping, visiting her parents. A picnic sounded simple but nice. I agreed to the idea. Her face lit up in a way that made me glad I'd agreed. She immediately started making plans while I stood there wondering what exactly one brings to a picnic. Our daughters heard the news and lost their minds with excitement. They started running around the house singing some song they made up on the spot about going to the park. My wife handled the food situation while I loaded the car with a blanket, some games, and a frisbee I found in the garage. The girls were basically vibrating with anticipation by the time we left. The park was packed when we arrived. Families everywhere, dogs running around, and the smell of cut grass in the air. We found a spot under a large oak tree that gave us shade and a good view of everything. The girls took off running while my wife and I set up our blanket and unpacked the food. I said this was nice. My wife agreed and said it was better than nice. It was perfect. She was right. For the first time in forever, I felt relaxed. The girls were playing nearby, my wife was happy, and I was eating a sandwich that actually tasted good. Everything felt right. That feeling lasted maybe 20 minutes. I noticed a woman walking toward us with purpose. 2 kids were following behind her, and she looked angry. My wife saw her too and said, "It looked like trouble." The woman was staring directly at me when she got closer. I stood up, putting myself between her and my family. My daughters stopped playing when they sensed something was wrong and came back to stand near us. The woman reached us, breathing hard. Her 2 sons stood behind her. The younger one had tear tracks on his dirty face. The older one looked uncomfortable. She pointed at me and then at my daughter, accusing her of hurting her son. She said my daughter had scratched him up and pushed him down the slide. I looked at my older daughter, who seemed genuinely confused and scared. She told us quietly that she didn't do anything. I told the woman there must be some mistake. I explained that we'd been here for about 40 minutes and my daughters hadn't left my sight. She insisted it wasn't a lie. She said her son doesn't lie and that he told her it was my daughter. She pointed an accusing finger at my daughter again. My wife stepped forward, trying to defuse the situation. She suggested we all calm down and talk about it because maybe there had been a misunderstanding. The woman refused to listen. She shouted that there was no misunderstanding and called my daughter a bully. She was screaming now. People around us had stopped what they were doing to watch. Her younger son tugged on her sleeve and spoke up through his tears. He told his mother it was another girl, not my daughter. He said the other girl had a different dress. The woman looked at him briefly, then shook her head and turned back to us. She insisted again that it was my daughter and said she knew it. My wife tried again to reason with her, but the woman wasn't hearing any of it. She kept yelling, getting more worked up by the second. I was about to suggest we find park security when everything went sideways. In a movement so fast I barely processed it, the woman lunged forward and grabbed my daughter by the hair. She yanked hard, pulling my daughter's head back. My daughter screamed in pain. My wife screamed my daughter's name in horror. Everything after that happened in slow motion, and all at once. I saw my daughter crying, heard my wife screaming, and felt something snap inside me. Without thinking, I grabbed the woman's wrist and pulled her hand away from my daughter's hair. I yelled at her to let my daughter go, but she didn't. She kept her grip, twisting my daughter's hair and calling her horrible names. She was threatening to teach her a lesson. My daughter was sobbing, my younger daughter was terrified, and this stranger had her hands on my child. I did the only thing I could think of to make it stop. With my free hand, I hit her directly in the nose. The impact was harder than I intended. She stumbled backward, released my daughter, and collapsed to the ground unconscious. The park went silent except for my daughter's crying. My wife immediately pulled both girls close to her. I looked around and realized everyone was staring at us. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I told my wife to call the police and get someone to check on the woman. My wife nodded and pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Park security showed up within minutes, followed by police and an ambulance. The medical team started working on the woman, while officers began taking statements from everyone who saw what happened. I couldn't stop thinking about my daughter. The sound of her scream kept replaying in my head. When the police asked me to explain what happened, I told them everything exactly when it occurred. They reviewed the security camera footage, which showed the whole incident from start to finish. One of the officers came back after watching the video. He told me that, given the situation, my reaction was within the bounds of protecting my child. He also said that I had quick reflexes. He asked what I did for a living. I told him I was a fighter pilot. He nodded and said that explained a lot. His words didn't make me feel better, though. What kind of parent wouldn't have done what I did? The woman had attacked my daughter. I'd done what was necessary to stop her. I decided right then to press charges. My daughter deserved justice for what this woman had done to her. After finishing with the police, we packed up our things and headed home. The car ride was quiet. Nobody felt much like talking. My daughter was the most affected. She wasn't hurt physically, but something had changed. She became nervous around strangers after that day. She didn't want to go to parks or anywhere crowded. Seeing her retreat into herself like that broke my heart. We got her help, talked to professionals, gave her time and space to process what happened. Slowly over the following weeks and months, she started coming back to herself. She learned how to manage her anxiety. She began trusting the world again little by little. I thought about those two boys sometimes, the ones whose mother had caused all of this. I hoped they would be okay. I hoped they'd have a chance at a better life than what they seemed to be getting. Nobody deserves to grow up watching their parent act like that. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.